What conspiracy theory would change the world if it ended up being true? Story 1. The Earth is a mosquito reserve. The entire universe does not want mosquitoes, but killing them off is not done. So now they have their own reserve, with especially tasty animals for them. Isn't this loosely the plot to Lilo and Stitch? Like, when Stitch landed on Earth, they were just going to blow it up. But Pleakley argued that the mosquito is an endangered species and the Earth is a protected wildlife reserve. Story 2, JFK shot first. I think his assassination would be a big one if proven the CIA was really behind it. Yeah, it was 60 years ago, but the thought that some higher unelected authority can just eliminate the leader of the country because they don't like him is very unsettling and completely undermines our elections and democracy. Story 3, Death Worlders. Our planet is so extremely dangerous that nothing should live here, especially not intelligent life. The average human is a horrible monster to every other intelligent life form in the galaxy. A viscous, undefeatable beast with sharp bones in its mouth used to rip up living flesh. A being whose brain produces chemicals to make it even more dangerous if it is threatened or having a good time. A meat-covered rock monster whose digestive system uses acid to incinerate its food. The rest of the galaxy keeps us quarantined because they know if we ever really get off this planet, we'll take over and nothing could stop us. Reminds me of John Deese at the end. I said, Dead World, is that where you're from? No, dude, that's where you're from. It's where we are now. This place, it's a horror show. If the guy next to you decides to knock you out of this world forever, he can do it with just a piece of metal or, hell, even his bare hand. You blobs, you sit there chilling in this room, and I can smell the rot of dead animals soaking in the acid of your guts. You suck the life from the innocent creatures of this world just so you can clock another day. You're machines that run on the terror and pain and mutilation of other lives. You'll scrape the world clean of every green and living thing until starvation goes 187 on every one of your sorry bums, your desperation to put off death, leading to the ultimate death of everybody and everything. Dude, I can't believe you ain't all paralyzed by the pure, naked horror of this place. After a long, long pause, John said, thank you. Story 4, there's a chance that Earth is part of a larger alien civilization. There is an island off the coast of Thailand called North Sentinel Island. The inhabitants of that island are the direct descendants of humans that left Africa, and they didn't have much contact with the rest of the world for the most part. Because of this, a lot of modern diseases, which most of the world is immune to, are lethal to them. They are still in the Stone Age, and no one understands their language. This island is part of India, and due to the reasons I mentioned above, India does not allow visitors to this island. The Indian Navy actually enforces a no-go zone around the island to protect the inhabitants from outsides who could introduce lethal diseases. The islanders do not know what India is, and that they are claiming and protecting. So what if there is an alien civilization that claims our solar system, and for some reason we do not know, do not introduce themselves to us? They could be checking up on us, UFO sightings. Basically, what if the Earth is the North Sentinel Island for galactic civilization that spans across multiple star systems? Story 5. A lot of conspiracy theories are really just things that actually happened. They just didn't rock the world because it's never allowed to rock anything until well after everybody's moved on. Rich and influential people are running amok, have been for decades, and they have the most powerful weapon on the planet, a lot of money. All we have is the meager ability to complain about it to each other, or worse, talk about it like it is just another urban legend. Strength in numbers has never looked so pathetic before this millennium. Story 6. The U.S. military recently had a whistleblower admit to having over 100 non-human vehicle wreckages, aircraft in their possession. However, it turned out he was actually given permission to disclose this information, which means he wasn't actually a whistleblower, and because of this, he wasn't able to disclose any classified info, such as picture or video proof. The whole thing is sketchy, but it was a U.S. official disclosing the info, and apparently there's a thing called the Five Eyes Alliance, which is a secretive global surveillance arrangement between the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand that had an open hearing and briefly discussed UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. Aliens are a prototypical red herring. It's a classic military technique. Disguise classified projects with something far-fetched so that nobody will believe witnesses. In this case, UFOs or UAPs are classified military aircraft. And all the talk about aliens is to make people assume that anyone who claims to have seen one is a nutter. If you look up a heat map of civilian UFO sightings and lay it over a map of military air bases, you'll find that the overlap is uncanny. Story 7 really not a conspiracy theory, but what these apes, you know which apes I'm talking about, have uncovered over the past 2.5 years is just unimaginable. The complete and entire market is corrupt, beginning with brokers, market makers, hedge funds, FED, SEC, etc. Having read the DD, almost everything what we are seeing now was predicted on these subs years ago. Just sheer hubris leads to all of this, and if you're interested, I'll walk you through everything I can in a short amount of time. But I would suggest from the bottom of my smooth brain, read the DDs and see for yourself. It's really like jumping into the rabbit hole. No one can make you jump, it has to start with you. Apes are generous and helpful, so feel free to ask. Love, health, and peace to all of you. Story 8. Oh my God. The theory that we are figments of a dying person's imagination. To explain, it is theorized that when someone dies, in the split second before they flatline, their brain creates an entire world to try to soften the blow. I can't find the original article, but it's similar to God in a way. I don't know the correct terminology, but one of my friends thinks about this. These are their thoughts. The universe started with a big bang, and scientists not knowing exactly why corresponds to when said person's death occurs. The brain continues to live for 30 seconds after everything else shuts down. The heat death of the universe could be when the brain dies, and natural disasters could be parts of the brain shutting down. Another part of the theory is that as it gets closer to death, it loses touch with emotions and reality, and we would therefore become less emotional. On to how it would shake the world. Let's say there's proof. Somehow, somewhere, someone found undeniable proof. It wouldn't be taken seriously at first. No duh, who would admit that? The brain wouldn't. Assuming, however, that it did and everyone took it seriously. Mass hysteria. There's no way to save the brain as the brain, and there's be lots of suicide, riots. Good things would happen, yes, but the brain tends to focus on the bad. Everyone would start riots, stealing, and basically the purge. Nobody would really care anymore, and people would give up. Nothing can be done to the dead. Story 9. The reason that we haven't managed to or used time travel yet or met any time travelers is that traveling back in time in any manner leads to you going to an alternate universe in which your mere presence makes it collapse, which would mean we're in one of those universes where a time traveler hasn't gone yet. Alien life exists, but purposely avoids Earth for anything other than tourism from orbit, since we're the universal example of civilization gone wrong. Schrodinger's glass of water is both half empty and half full at the same time, until you wonder which one it actually is. Story 10. One conspiracy theory that would undoubtedly rock the world, if it turned out to be true, is the idea that a powerful group of individuals or organizations secretly control and manipulate global events, including governments, economies, and major world events. This theory is often referred to as the New World Order. If evidence emerged confirming the existence of such a global cabal, it would shatter people's trust in established institutions and undermine the foundations of democracy. The revelation that key decisions affecting the world are made behind closed doors, away from public scrutiny and accountability, would generate widespread outrage and a sense of betrayal. The impact of such a revelation would likely be profound and far-reaching. Governments would face intense scrutiny and calls for radical reform, and public confidence in political leaders would be severely undermined. The global economy could experience significant disruptions as people lose faith in financial systems and institutions controlled by the alleged conspirators. Social unrest and protests would likely escalate as people demand justice and transparency. Additionally, the implications for international relations would be enormous. Countries that were once allies might view each other with suspicion, wondering who among them is part of the secretive group. Diplomatic relations could be strained, and the world could witness an erosion of trust between nations on an unprecedented scale. Ultimately, the shockwaves caused by the confirmation of such a conspiracy theory would reshape the global landscape. The struggle for transparency, accountability, and a fairer distribution of power would become paramount as societies grapple with the implications and strive to rebuild trust in their institutions. Story 11. That science can prove that humans are more of an ancient species than we believe. An ancient site in Turkey proves that humans could build large structures of stone thousands of years before the pyramids, before agriculture, before early humans settled. Then we believed. The site literally pushed back the human timeline. How long have we really been here? What else did we build? What kind of society was it? Were there kings, gods, governments? Also, there are footprints in stone that are in Central America, I think, going back thousands of years before the humans supposedly crossed the land bridge connecting Alaska and Russia. Lastly, did the Native Americans really fight giants? There is documented proof of a tribe going to war with giants and winning, but this is chalked up as a bedtime story. Folklore, maybe? These may not cause a huge stir, but I would be baffled by all. Story 12. The Christian God is real, and the Bible is completely true. Science and logic would suddenly both be irrelevant. We couldn't even trust mathematical equations to be valid any longer. If it's not covered in the Bible, too bad. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. 5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. 6. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Think about that. Things we literally worked out and proved that it functions, like an airplane's fuel consumption with a tailwind. Invalidated because it doesn't fit. But we could totally walk on water and move mountains with our faith. Story 13. The elites really run the country, and government, presidents, and elected officials are just pawns. There's a collective of old rich families that really run everything. That show, The Blacklist, really gives you insight on the kind of syndicate that damn near runs the world. I don't think shadow governments would be all that shocking, honestly. Does anybody really believe that the ultimate power over society changes hands freely every 4 to 6 years? I certainly don't. People in power tend to want to stay in power, and 2, be extremely secretive. Think mafia bosses, neither of which apply to elected politicians, those supposedly in power. Elections, for the most part, I believe, are just a charade of choice. Elected leaders are there to take the heat and, more importantly, attention from those actually in power throughout the world. Story 14. Beginning in the late 17th century, Sabatians successfully infiltrated all governments and social groups and continue to do so today, maintaining a thriving, parallel, multicultural collective of secret leadership bent on filling the world with evil in order to exhaust its supply from the universe. It's either that or neoliberalism, people. Take your pick. Either way, you can't solve the problem, whatever you imagine it to be, by acting like them because they're already watching you. Story 15. Gangstalking is very real and funded/run by the United States government. Basically, the government has a secret mind control behavior modification program where they systematically torture everyday Americans basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have technology where they can make people hear voices that nobody else can hear. They can artificially read people's thoughts, subvocal recognition. They use directed energy weapons, which make life a living hell. They hire people to follow, harass, and gaslight targets, and their entire mission is to abuse someone so bad psychologically and physically that they break down and either end themselves or change however they want them to change. The reason this would rock the world is that many of their victims have snapped and gone on shooting rampages. Many of the victims just end themselves, but this program is completely illegal, unethical, and immoral. Programs like these have already been exposed in the past, like COINTELPRO and MK Ultra. After 9/11, they got bold and used the Patriot Act to up their game and go after far more people than ever with complete immunity. Story 16. Nostradamus predicted the end of the world. In the year ending in 2077, coming from the nation with the iron fist, Russia has been named the Iron Curtain before on Earth. The earth shall bathe in holy fire. It will not be the end for those able to find shelter, but another bloody chapter. People will finally understand true peace once rebuilt. Scary, but it certainly seems like nuclear war is gonna happen. What with Russia pointing nukes at America, and China now has hypersonic nuclear missiles. Maybe not nuclear war, maybe a solar flare from the sun. It's also considered holy fire always being around and all. But nuclear war could also be considered holy fire as well. Maybe if we look back at this post after 2077, we will know if he was right. He was right scary amounts of times. Story 17, I've always thought that the 9/11 crash in Pennsylvania was shot down. It just makes too much sense that they knew it was headed to the White House or Capitol, so they shot it down. Then, when the Let's Roll stuff came out, they said, screw it, let America have its heroes. Let their families believe they died fighting, not by the hand of a fighter pilot, faced with the hardest decision of his life. I just posted this elsewhere, but I'm going to repeat it again. My sister is going to school in PA and is finishing up her physician's assistant program. She currently works with the first responders to the crash. She says that no one, even those outside of the hospital in the area, think it was brought down by the passengers. Everyone knows it was shot down. When they were sent out to respond, that was exactly what they were told. Even the local news stations reported it as being shot down. Story 18. I believe in the conspiracy of human personal greed. I don't think there is a great massive conspiracy, an Illuminati, or any such thing. Instead, it's the everyday back and forth of small conspiracies. A couple governments getting together to plan such and such maneuver for their best interest. A few companies in an industry get together to come up with a plan to maximize their profit. The queen bee cow in a company working a manager over to get someone fired. It is the psychosocial eco-bio pressures that come with having 7 billion of us around. Story 19. The U.S. government tests crazy advanced planes and equipment. They leave 1,000-mile-long contrails and create floating rings. They like UFO stories. It started during the Cold War. The Soviets have huge files on unidentified flying objects, American equipment, that a lot of people mistake as extraterrestrial. Most fanatics who might actually dig deep enough to find out about some cool, top-secret tech get so distracted by the temptation of aliens that they never follow the leads to the true stuff. I believe there might even be people whose entire job is to feed the desire for proof of aliens. Like they go through and purposefully redact parts of files, making them seem more nefarious than they are. Story 21st, a little background. There is a project called the Global Consciousness Project, which aims to prove that there is a global consciousness. It's trying to do this by cataloging the data collected by a network of true random number generators distributed around the world, and has been doing so for well over a decade. When a significant global event occurs, i.e., an assassination, earthquake, plane crash, etc., it's theorized that having many people focusing their attention on a single event will affect the random number generators in a slight but not insignificant way. What they found, although there is some debate, is that during the time a global event is happening, occasionally the random numbers do fluctuate in a way that is significantly different than what random chance would otherwise suggest. Now, here's the conspiracy. These random number generators are actually affected by quantum fluctuations caused by time travelers arriving and then leaving a certain point in time to witness an event. The effect is more compounded when more time travelers arrive at a specific time, rather than, say, a few arriving within a time span that is more spread out. For example, the data for the 9/11 attacks. There's a steady rise in the unlikelihood of the random numbers generated beginning around 4 hours before the attacks, peaking at just after the second plane hit, and then showing a dramatic drop-off after the collapse of the towers, with another major peak around 4:20 p.m., about an hour before World Trade Center 7 collapsed, and then returning to what would be expected by chance. So what's happening is that time travelers start to converge on September 11th, 2001, mostly starting around 4 or 5 a.m., some to witness the terrorists preparing for the attack. More and more start to show up until just before the first impact. Then, throughout the attack, you have a lot of travelers coming and going, revisiting certain aspects of the attack. Then another spike for the travelers who are curious about World Trade Center 7. Hint, there's not special about it, but it's part of 9/11 lore. And then finally, as the day winds down, they all start to leave. Story 21. The Denver International Airport was built with motives other than being an airport. Sure, a blue Bronco makes sense, but the person who made it like 30 feet tall and crazy scary. Then they get a statue of Anubis and point it at the front doors. Then they have all of these crazy-ass paintings of German dudes in gas masks and kids. I believe that it was open to the public so people would not suspect anything, but, I mean, come on. There is seriously a mini underground city under the airport. It is not used for much right now, or so we think. Also, a person noticed. I have no clue if it is still happening. But long after the airport was completed, there was a construction crew working on some underground thing right next to the airport. Story 22, Paul McCartney, passed away in 1966. And now, a double lives his life. Through 1966, Paul McCartney had 13 number one singles. Post 1966, Paul McCartney had 19 number one singles. If they're counted as separate artists, that would make post 1966 McCartney the artist with the most number one hits of all time. And that would make pre 1966 McCartney come in third. Thus, what you're saying is the number one best charting music artist in history and the number three best charting music artist in history both just happen to look, sound, and act identical. In addition to writing songs in the same style, playing the same instruments with the same techniques, and having all of the same knowledge about events that only a person should know about. This person was also never outed by his bandmates, friends, family, or the press. Story 23. The Iranian hostage crisis of 1979 to 1981 was exploited by members of the American intelligence and military establishment as a means of discrediting President Jimmy Carter, who had initiated a period of détente with the Soviet Union and had curtailed the CIA's covert operations around the globe. Carter's attempts to negotiate the release of the 66 hostages from the American embassy were continually frustrated, leading ultimately to a failed rescue attempt, Operation Eagle Claw, in April of 1980. Carter's failure to bring the hostages home was devastating to his approval ratings in the U.S., and he was swept out of office in the presidential election later that year. Ultimately, the hostages were released on January 19, 1981, mere minutes after Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. Reagan just happened to be the most CIA-friendly president in the history of the agency, and he relaunched the agency's covert operations in a big way, as well reigniting the tension with the Soviet Union through his inflammatory rhetoric and insane defense policies. Story 24. Subliminal messages work and are encoded everywhere in modern-day life. If you're reading this and thinking, nonsense, think again. There was a test conducted in the 50s where the words, "hungry, eat popcorn," flashed up on the screen and popcorn sales went up 50%. Of course, it's common knowledge this test and its results were fabricated. But I don't think they were. It seems strange for someone to admit a couple of weeks after the test that it was a hoax. Someone high up saw the potential of subliminal messages and paid the person who conducted the test to spread the word it was faked. Story 25. The United States used a tactical nuclear weapon in Fallujah. The increase in mutations and stillborns in the years following years can be used as evidence, although the popular explanation is the rampant use of depleted uranium shells. I remember the pictures of the charred bodies and the remains of Fallujah, and I remember it looking eerily similar to the aftermath of Hiroshima. Nuclear weapons produce extremely obvious telltale seismic and radioactive fallout signatures. There is no feasible way to mask these. Pretty much every major government and many universities would be capable of independently confirming a nuclear strike. Someone would have said something.